Before the beloved YN of the 21st century, there was the teenager. A product mostly of the 1950s, this new demographic skipped school, drove cars, and listened to rock and roll. The politicians said the nation's morals were collapsing and race mixing, the biggest American fear possible, was rising fast. But here's the thing, nothing supernatural was happening. America had simply invented something brand new, and that terrified the adults who built post-war America. Before the 1950s, there wasn't such a thing as a teenager. You were a child, then suddenly an adult, often working a job by 16. World War II ends and paychecks rise. Suddenly, teens have cars and money to burn. Big businesses noticed and quickly began targeting the new crowd with magazines, music labels, and fashion lines specifically made for them. So the end result of all of this was the first generation in the United States that didn't care to become their parents. Not only this, they openly rejected the concept of becoming their parents. Rock and roll was the sound of this rebellion. It was loud, it was fast. It was the sound of the 1950s teen, a product of blending black R&B, blues, jazz, and even gospel. Elvis Presley, I'm sure you've heard of him, was the lightning rod for all of this. Young, wild, and moving his hips on national television, said to have a white man's body, yet the voice of a black man. Many were in disbelief when they saw his complexion, similar to Frankie Lyman or Bobby Caldwell going on stage. To teenagers, the music was free and expressive. It was something new, exclusive to them. But to the adults, it was obscenity designed to corrupt the young minds of tomorrow. Just like jazz, preachers called it the devil's music.
Reasons on rock and roll music and why I preach against it, and I believe a contributing factor to our juvenile delinquency of today. I know how it feels when you sing it. I know what it does to you.
Politicians warned it would destroy the moral fiber of the youth, and the general public began calling it race music, since it put young black and white people near one another, allowing them to, mingle and humanize each other. Were the adults overreacting? Yeah. You have to remember though, these are the same people that were convinced that the hot jazz of a few decades prior was sexy and, seductive, even when it didn't have lyrics. The fear spread quickly. Concerts were banned, radios censored this so-called race music, and parents stayed up late at night to make sure their kids weren't sneaking out to go see a rock and roll show. Some towns even burned records out in public. But the more adults panicked, the more the kids loved it. Rebellion was becoming fashionable, giving birth to things like this. Now, if you grew up with parents who geeked over lyrics, you know this feeling. If you were born in this time, do you think you would have stayed in line and behaved yourself or joined the radical rock and roll crew back then? The 1950s didn't just fear the music though, they feared the teenagers themselves. Movies like Rebel Without a Cause and The Wild One showed disaffected youth fighting authority, and the adults thought they were documentaries or even tutorials for the teenagers. If you thought the video games cause violence crowd was hysterical, well get this, a Senate committee in the 50s actually investigated whether comic books were turning kids into criminals. Yes, people literally burned comic books in church parking lots. Oh, I caught Jimmy reading that Superman. Oh, Barb, say it ain't so. Well, I caught Little Richard flipping through that dastardly Captain Tootsie comic. Heavens, well if this keeps up, before we know it, he'll be swapping out that old tank for a flip top and getting creamed by the greasers in the cooler from the Passion Pit. But guess what? Crime statistics didn't actually show that there was any sort of teenage crime wave, or even the suggestion of it. It was almost entirely media hysteria, which reveals the hidden truth to this whole thing. The real revolution wasn't found in comic books, film, or even Elvis. It was found in the control. The real threat was that the teenagers were able to gain independence, culturally, socially, and even economically. That's what scared the people that lived through the Great Depression and World War II. Now, if you're like me, you probably grew up hearing in popular media that teenagers were simply always up to no good, as if everybody aged 13 to 18 was like Bart Simpson or Dennis the Menace or Ferris Bueller or something. This notion's far from the truth, but the idea of teenagers being hooligans was birthed in the 50s. Now, what adults called delinquency was really identity in a new labeled independence, the style of independence that carried influence with it, influence sufficient to change the nation that the adults had grown up in. Teenagers in the 1950s were the first generation raised entirely on mass media. They were able to see themselves on screens, hear themselves in music, and realize we have power now. This is the major turning point of this entire timeline. Teenage power terrified older generations not just because they could go out to concerts or drive, but because it shifted control of American culture over from the adults to the teenagers, and both parties realized it. Before, the adults set the trends, but now the high schoolers did it. They decided what was cool, what was sold, and what mattered. And if you ask me, that never really changed too much. Think about it. Dabbing, Among Us, I Show Speed, 6-7. Trends start in high schools and group chats and Discord servers. You tell me, do young people still control culture more than the adults? The 1950s thought they were facing some type of moral crisis, but what they were really facing was a new kind of citizen. It seems to me America's fear was not teenagers, but instead the exchange of cultural power. Every generation finds its own way to scare the one before it. It makes you wonder, what will Gen Alpha do to scare Gen Z beyond, drool on iPads and Olive Garden? If you learned anything, or you disagree, or you agree and you want to talk about it, let me know in the comments, and like the video if you liked the video. Thanks as always.